There are moments in history when the noise of the world becomes so loud that most people cannot hear the deeper rhythm underneath it. Yet those who study patterns, economic patterns, spiritual patterns, prophetic patterns, begin to notice that the chaos is not random at all. Across the globe, nations are trembling under financial uncertainty. Industries are restructuring at lightning speed, and artificial intelligence is quietly rewriting the future of work, while millions wonder where they will fit in a rapidly transforming system. Markets surge one week and collapse the next. Political tensions escalate across continents, and entire generations feel the pressure of a world shifting beneath their feet. But hidden beneath headlines and economic forecasts is a quieter clock, one that ancient civilizations watched carefully, the celestial clock that marks turning points in human destiny. As March 13 approaches, a rare alignment between Mars and the North Node draws near. And for those who understand symbolism, timing, and prophetic cycles, this moment represents far more than a passing astronomical event. It signals the opening of pathways, the unveiling of direction, and the awakening of purpose that many have been unknowingly preparing for during years of confusion and delay. Throughout scripture and history, there are seasons when individuals feel lost, overlooked, or even buried under circumstances they never expected, only to discover later that those same seasons were preparing them for leadership. The Bible tells us in Genesis 37 about Joseph, a young man thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for years, before eventually standing in the palace of Egypt, interpreting dreams that would save entire nations from famine. Joseph did not know, while sitting in that prison cell, that the hardship was shaping his wisdom, sharpening his perception, and positioning him at the intersection of economic crisis and divine strategy. And now, as we watch the modern world enter a similar era of uncertainty, the question quietly emerges: could it be that many people alive today are walking through their own version of Joseph's preparation season? If you look carefully at the last few years, the patterns become impossible to ignore. Entire industries have been disrupted by automation and artificial intelligence, forcing workers, entrepreneurs, and leaders to rethink the meaning of stability and security in the modern economy. Jobs that once seemed permanent are disappearing, while entirely new fields are emerging almost overnight, leaving millions in a strange space between the old world and the new one. Some have lost careers, others have relocated across countries, and many have experienced emotional or spiritual awakenings they never expected. At the same time, global supply chains have fractured. Inflation has challenged household stability, and geopolitical tensions remind us how fragile modern systems truly are. To the casual observer, these events may seem like disconnected crises, but when viewed through the lens of prophetic cycles, they begin to resemble something else entirely. A massive transition phase where structures are breaking so that new leadership, new wisdom, and new strategies can emerge. This is where the symbolism of the Mars North Node alignment becomes especially powerful, because in ancient astrological tradition the North Node has always represented destiny, direction, and the evolutionary path of collective growth. Mars, on the other hand, represents courage, action, and the fire required to step into purpose, even when the path ahead is uncertain. When these two forces converge, the message is not one of passive observation, but of movement, awakening, and decisive forward momentum. And that is why so many people around the world have recently felt a strange internal pressure, as if something within them is calling them to rise beyond survival and step into something greater. Yet destiny rarely reveals itself in comfortable environments. Joseph did not discover his purpose while living peacefully with his family. He discovered it while navigating betrayal, prison walls, and long seasons of silence. Many people watching this moment in history are experiencing something similar in their own lives, even if the circumstances look different on the surface. Some feel stuck in careers that no longer align with who they are becoming. Others feel isolated in environments that do not understand their vision, and many feel like they have been delayed, while others move ahead. But what if those delays were not setbacks at all? What if they were training grounds designed to build the kind of resilience, discernment, and strategic thinking that leadership requires in times of crisis? Throughout biblical history, the individuals chosen to guide nations were rarely prepared in comfort. They were forged in difficulty. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before confronting Pharaoh. David tended sheep alone in the fields before leading armies and ruling a kingdom. Joseph interpreted dreams in a prison cell before advising Pharaoh on how to survive economic collapse. And now we stand at a moment when the global system itself appears to be entering a period of restructuring that will require a new generation of thinkers, builders, and visionaries who understand both strategy and spirit. The Mars North Node alignment symbolically marks a moment when courage meets destiny, when preparation meets opportunity, and when individuals who once felt hidden begin to sense that their experiences were not random chapters, but pieces of a much larger story. Across the African diaspora and beyond, this message carries even deeper resonance, because history has shown again and again that periods of hardship often conceal seeds of extraordinary leadership. Communities that have endured displacement, systemic barriers, and generational struggles have also produced innovators, cultural architects, and spiritual voices who reshape the future in ways the world did not expect. The Joseph narrative itself reflects this paradox: the rejected becoming the strategist, the prisoner becoming the advisor, the overlooked becoming the one who interprets the moment when others cannot see clearly. In the modern world, where artificial intelligence is transforming industries and economies are shifting toward entirely new models of productivity, there will be a profound need for leaders who can read patterns beyond surface-level information. Data analysts can interpret numbers, but wisdom interprets timing, human behavior, and spiritual direction. That is why so many people today are experiencing an unusual internal stirring, as though their perspective on life is expanding beyond routine survival into a deeper awareness of calling. They are questioning systems that once seemed unquestionable, exploring new forms of learning, and sensing that the world they grew up expecting may no longer be the world they are meant to build their future within. This is not simply restlessness. It is the early stage of awakening, the moment when individuals begin realizing that their lives may intersect with global transformation in ways they never imagined. And this is where the approaching alignment becomes more than symbolism. It becomes a mirror reflecting the possibility that the next chapter of many lives is about to unfold. When Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, interpreting dreams that predicted 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine, his years of hardship suddenly revealed their purpose. Every betrayal had sharpened his emotional intelligence. Every prison conversation had trained his ability to read people, and every moment of waiting had strengthened his patience and clarity. In the same way, the difficulties many have faced in recent years, economic uncertainty, personal losses, unexpected career shifts, may actually be the very experiences preparing them for roles that require insight, resilience, and courage. The world is entering a period where traditional pathways to success are rapidly dissolving, and new forms of leadership will emerge from individuals who understand how to navigate uncertainty with vision. That is why the days surrounding March 13 carry a symbolic intensity that cannot be ignored by those who study patterns of destiny and preparation. It is not about predicting a single dramatic event on the calendar. It is about recognizing a window of momentum when clarity begins to replace confusion, and when individuals feel compelled to take decisive steps toward the paths they were born to walk. Somewhere in the quiet corners of the world, people who once felt forgotten are beginning to sense that the pit was never their final destination, that the prison season was never permanent, and that the palace whatever form it takes in their calling, may be closer than they ever imagined. If we continue tracing the pattern that has quietly unfolded across centuries, we begin to realize that the most significant shifts in human history rarely announce themselves with clear instructions. They arrive disguised as confusion, economic pressure, technological upheaval, and spiritual restlessness, forcing entire generations to confront questions they once avoided. The world we are watching right now is entering such a phase where familiar systems no longer provide the stability they once promised, and people everywhere are sensing that the rules of the game are being rewritten in real time. Artificial intelligence is accelerating faster than most governments can regulate. Global labor markets are transforming at a pace that leaves millions uncertain about their future, and the old guarantees of lifelong careers and predictable economies are quietly dissolving. Yet for those who study prophetic cycles and historical patterns, this kind of instability often marks the beginning of something far more profound than collapse. It marks the preparation stage for a new order of leadership. Throughout Scripture, God repeatedly used periods of disruption to elevate individuals who had been trained in hidden places long before the crisis appeared. Joseph's rise in Egypt did not happen during calm prosperity. It happened precisely when Pharaoh needed someone who could interpret the deeper meaning behind disturbing dreams about famine and abundance. In other words, Joseph's gift only became visible when the system around him started to fail. And if we examine the current moment carefully, we begin to notice that the same dynamic is unfolding across the modern world, where uncertainty is exposing the limits of conventional thinking and quietly creating space for individuals with unusual insight and courage. Many viewers watching this unfolding story may not realize that they themselves have been experiencing a kind of internal preparation that mirrors Joseph's journey more closely than they expected. Over the last few years, countless people have faced disruptions that forced them to rethink their identity, their purpose, and the direction of their lives. Careers ended unexpectedly, businesses had to reinvent themselves overnight, and entire communities found themselves adapting to technological systems that were once considered distant science fiction. For some, these changes felt like punishment or loss, yet hindsight often reveals that forced transitions carry hidden opportunities. Joseph's imprisonment initially appeared to be the end of his story, but within that prison he encountered individuals whose dreams would later connect him to Pharaoh's palace. The very environment that seemed like confinement turned out to be the bridge to his destiny. In the same way, many people today have met mentors, discovered talents, or developed resilience precisely because circumstances pushed them into unfamiliar territory. What felt like a setback often opened doors to knowledge, networks, and personal growth that would never have emerged inside comfortable routines. When we examine the symbolism of the Mars North Node alignment approaching on March 13, the deeper message begins to resonate more clearly. Destiny does not simply appear one morning without preparation. It reveals itself after seasons of pressure have refined the character needed to carry it. Mars, historically associated with courage, conflict, and decisive action, represents the fire required to move when hesitation would otherwise keep people frozen in fear. The North Node, symbolizing the direction of collective evolution, represents the path humanity is meant to move toward, even when that path requires leaving familiar territory behind. When these two forces align symbolically, the narrative becomes one of movement toward purpose, of individuals stepping into roles they may have felt unqualified for only months earlier. This is why so many people across the world are suddenly feeling a sense of urgency they cannot easily explain. They are questioning careers that once seemed secure, exploring creative ideas they once dismissed, and sensing that the future will belong to those who are willing to adapt quickly while remaining grounded in deeper principles. The modern economy increasingly rewards innovation, vision, and strategic thinking rather than simple repetition of tasks. And artificial intelligence is accelerating this shift by automating roles that once formed the backbone of middle-class stability. In such a landscape, the individuals who rise will not simply be those with technical skills, but those who possess the ability to interpret complex patterns and guide others through uncertainty. Joseph's gift was not merely administrative skill. It was the ability to interpret the meaning of events before others understood their implications. And as the global system experiences its own version of unsettling dreams, market volatility, technological disruption, and political instability, the need for interpreters of the moment becomes more urgent than ever. There is also a spiritual dimension to this transition that cannot be ignored, especially for those who recognize the deep connection between biblical narratives and the cycles of human history. Scripture repeatedly emphasizes that seasons of testing are not signs of abandonment, but evidence of preparation. In the book of James, believers are reminded that the testing of faith produces perseverance, and perseverance shapes maturity and completeness of character. Joseph's trials were not random obstacles, but the training ground where he learned humility, patience, and emotional intelligence, qualities that later enabled him to manage Egypt's resources during a global famine. Without those years of hardship, he might have had the technical knowledge to organize grain storage, but he would have lacked the wisdom to lead a nation through crisis. The same principle applies today, where the leaders who will emerge during this era of technological and economic transformation will likely be those who have endured unusual paths that taught them adaptability and depth. Many viewers listening to this message have quietly accumulated skills, insights, and experiences that seemed disconnected at the time, but now appear to form a larger pattern. The job that felt temporary, the failure that forced reinvention, the season of isolation that led to deep self-reflection. These chapters may actually represent the building blocks of a future role that is only beginning to reveal itself. Across the African diaspora, and within communities that have historically carried both struggle and resilience, this message resonates with particular intensity. History has repeatedly shown that people forged in adversity often develop a unique perspective capable of reshaping entire systems. Cultural innovators, entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, and political visionaries have emerged from communities that were once dismissed by mainstream institutions, proving that resilience can generate creativity and strategic thinking that others overlook. The Joseph narrative reminds us that divine preparation often occurs outside the centers of power, in places where individuals are forced to rely on wisdom rather than privilege. When Joseph eventually stood before Pharaoh, he did not merely present a clever economic plan. He offered insight that saved multiple nations from starvation. That kind of leadership requires the ability to see beyond immediate circumstances into the patterns shaping the future. And today, as artificial intelligence reshapes the global workforce and economic power shifts across continents, the world is entering a moment when unconventional leaders may rise from places previously ignored by traditional power structures. Individuals who understand both technological change and spiritual principles may find themselves uniquely equipped to guide communities through unfamiliar terrain. This is why the days surrounding March 13 feel symbolically charged with anticipation for those paying attention to deeper patterns. The alignment itself does not magically transform lives overnight, but it reflects a moment when the internal and external pressures of the world converge to push individuals toward decisive action. For some, this may mean launching a project that has lived in the background of their mind for years. For others, it may mean stepping away from environments that no longer align with their growth and embracing a calling that once felt too intimidating to pursue. The key theme is movement. Movement out of the pit, movement out of the prison, and movement toward the palace of purpose that each individual is uniquely designed to occupy. Joseph did not walk into Pharaoh's court with arrogance. He arrived with clarity born from experience, ready to serve a purpose greater than his own survival. In the same way, the emerging generation of leaders will not simply chase personal success. They will recognize that their gifts exist to guide others through turbulent times. As the world continues navigating economic shifts, technological revolutions, and spiritual awakenings, the individuals who understand this calling will step forward with a sense of mission that transcends ordinary ambition. And for many who have endured long seasons of waiting, the approaching alignment may mark the moment when the path ahead finally begins to reveal itself with unmistakable clarity. As the world moves closer to this symbolic turning point, something deeper begins to surface beneath the daily stream of headlines and social media noise. You can feel it in conversations happening across households, workplaces, and communities where people who once moved through life on autopilot are suddenly asking larger questions about purpose, identity, and direction. The global economy is no longer simply about supply chains and quarterly reports. It is becoming a stage where massive structural change is forcing humanity to confront what kind of future it truly intends to build. Artificial intelligence is rewriting the nature of labor. Automation is redefining productivity, and entire industries are shifting toward models that did not exist even a decade ago. But beneath the technological revolution lies a quiet or spiritual awakening where individuals are beginning to sense that their value cannot be measured only by job titles or paychecks. The approaching Mars North Node alignment mirrors this internal awakening, because historically these moments have symbolized a crossroads where courage meets destiny, and individuals are compelled to step into roles they once avoided. For many viewers listening right now, the last few years may have felt like wandering through a wilderness of uncertainty, where plans collapsed, expectations shifted, and the future appeared clouded by unpredictability. Yet if you study biblical history carefully, you discover that the wilderness is often the place where identity is clarified and vision is formed. Moses did not receive his calling while living comfortably in Egypt's palace. He encountered it in the quiet solitude of the desert, while tending sheep, far removed from the systems of power he once knew. In the same way, the global disruptions of recent years may have been guiding millions of people into a wilderness season designed to strip away illusions and reveal deeper purpose. Consider the parallels between Joseph's story and the strange economic landscape unfolding today. When Pharaoh dreamed of 7 fat cows, followed by 7 thin cows, the imagery represented cycles of abundance and scarcity that would reshape entire civilizations. Joseph understood that prosperity without preparation leads to disaster, and he advised Pharaoh to store resources during the years of plenty so that Egypt could survive the coming famine. Now look at the modern world, where financial systems have expanded rapidly over decades of technological growth and global trade. Yet many experts warn that economic volatility could define the coming years. Markets swing unpredictably, new technologies disrupt traditional industries, and entire populations are adjusting to the realization that the stability of the past cannot be guaranteed in the future. In such an environment, the ability to interpret patterns becomes invaluable. Leaders who can anticipate change, rather than react to it, will guide communities through uncertainty, just as Joseph guided Egypt through the famine. And this is precisely where the symbolic energy of Mars aligning with the North Node carries its deeper meaning. It represents the courage required to step into roles of responsibility during times when others feel overwhelmed by complexity. The individuals who rise during these moments are not necessarily the loudest voices or the most traditionally powerful figures. They are often the ones who have spent years quietly learning, observing, and preparing while the world rushed forward without reflection. Many people watching this moment unfold may still feel as though they are standing on the edge of their own story, uncertain about whether they truly possess the ability to lead create, or innovate in a world changing so rapidly. But Joseph likely felt the same uncertainty while sitting in a prison cell, interpreting dreams for fellow inmates, without any guarantee that his gift would ever be recognized beyond those walls. Leadership often begins in hidden places, where character is shaped long before recognition arrives. The discipline to continue developing your abilities during seasons when no one is watching is one of the defining traits of those who eventually guide others through crisis. This is why so many prophetic teachings emphasize the importance of preparation during times of obscurity. The world tends to celebrate sudden success, yet most transformative leaders spend years cultivating wisdom in environments that appear insignificant to outsiders. When the moment finally arrives for them to step forward, it may seem sudden to observers, but in reality it is the result of a long journey of learning, testing, and spiritual refinement. As March 13 approaches and discussions of the Mars North Node alignment spread across communities that study symbolic timing, the deeper message remains consistent. Preparation is meeting opportunity, and those who have endured their wilderness seasons are beginning to sense that a new chapter is forming. There is also an undeniable cultural dimension to this awakening, particularly among people whose histories are rooted in resilience, migration, and the continuous rebuilding of identity across generations. The African diaspora, with its rich tapestry of cultural memory and spiritual endurance, carries within it the legacy of turning adversity into innovation. From music and art to entrepreneurship and social leadership, countless contributions have emerged from communities that were forced to develop creativity and determination under pressure. This pattern echoes the biblical narrative, where individuals who faced displacement or hardship often became catalysts for transformation within larger societies. Joseph himself was a foreigner in Egypt, yet he rose to become the strategist who preserved the nation during famine. His perspective as an outsider allowed him to interpret events differently from those who had always lived within the system's comfort. Today, in a globalized world where cultures intersect more than ever before, diverse perspectives are becoming essential for solving complex challenges. The next generation of innovators, leaders, and spiritual guides may come from backgrounds that traditional institutions once overlooked, precisely because those backgrounds cultivate adaptability and depth of insight. When people who have endured struggle combine their resilience with emerging technologies and visionary thinking, they create possibilities that established systems often fail to imagine. And yet the most powerful transformation begins not with external recognition, but with an internal shift in how individuals perceive their own journey. There comes a moment when a person stops viewing their past hardships as evidence of failure and begins recognizing them as chapters of preparation. Joseph could have spent the rest of his life resenting his brothers for their betrayal or lamenting the years lost in prison, but instead he chose to interpret his experiences through a lens of purpose. Later in Genesis, when his brothers feared his revenge, Joseph told them something remarkable. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive." That statement reveals a profound truth about destiny, that the events which appear destructive in the moment may actually be repositioning individuals for influence that extends far beyond their personal story. As the symbolic alignment of Mars and the North Node approaches, many people may begin to reevaluate the narrative they have been telling themselves about their lives. What if the delays were not wasted time? What if the closed doors redirected you toward paths you were meant to explore all along? What if the uncertainty of recent years was not evidence that you were lost, but confirmation that you were being prepared for a role that required courage, faith, and vision? The world stands at the threshold of profound transformation, where technology, economics, and spirituality are converging in ways rarely seen in human history. Artificial intelligence may automate tasks, but it cannot replace wisdom, empathy, or the ability to interpret the deeper meaning of events shaping societies. Those qualities emerge from lived experience, reflection, and spiritual awareness, the very elements that are often cultivated during seasons of struggle. As individuals across the globe sense the stirring of destiny within them, the question becomes not whether change is coming, but whether they are willing to step forward when the moment calls. Joseph did not hesitate when Pharaoh summoned him to interpret the dream that would alter Egypt's future. He trusted the preparation that had been forming within him all along. In the same way, the symbolic energy surrounding March 13 invites viewers to consider whether they are ready to act when clarity begins to emerge. Because sometimes the alignment of events, opportunities, and inner conviction happens quickly, and those who recognize the moment must move with both courage and humility. Somewhere in the unfolding story of this era, individuals who once felt hidden are beginning to realize that their journey through uncertainty may have been the very process shaping them into the leaders, innovators, and visionaries needed for the world that is now taking shape. And so we arrive at the threshold of the final question that quietly echoes through this entire unfolding moment. What happens when preparation finally meets the moment of revelation? History shows us that destiny rarely arrives with loud announcements or flashing signs. Instead, it appears as a subtle shift in awareness, where individuals suddenly recognize that the path in front of them has been forming all along. The world right now is filled with signals of transformation, economic systems evolving under the pressure of technology, societies redefining the nature of work and leadership, and millions of people sensing an internal call to step beyond the limitations that once defined their lives. Artificial intelligence may continue reshaping industries and automating processes that once required human labor, but there remains something profoundly human that no algorithm can replicate: the ability to discern purpose within chaos. That ability has guided leaders throughout history. Whenever civilizations faced moments of uncertainty, Joseph stood in Pharaoh's court, not merely as an interpreter of dreams, but as a strategist capable of guiding a nation through a looming crisis that others could not yet fully comprehend. In the same way, the symbolic approach of the Mars North Node alignment invites viewers to reflect on the possibility that the confusion of recent years may have been preparing them for a moment when clarity finally begins to emerge. The alignment does not impose destiny upon anyone. It simply marks a window when courage and direction intersect, when individuals who have spent years learning in hidden places begin to sense that their time to act may be approaching. For many people listening, the past seasons of life may have felt like standing inside Joseph's prison, watching opportunities pass by, while wondering whether their gifts would ever find the right environment to flourish. There may have been moments of frustration, where it seemed as though others advanced more quickly or received recognition more easily. Yet one of the most powerful lessons within Joseph's story is that divine timing rarely aligns with human impatience. While Joseph waited in confinement, the political and economic conditions of Egypt were slowly moving toward a crisis that would require his exact combination of wisdom and resilience. Without the famine that Pharaoh's dreams predicted, Joseph's abilities might have remained unnoticed. In other words, the moment of crisis became the doorway through which destiny entered his life. When we observe the modern world through this lens, the turbulence of the present era begins to look less like random instability and more like a transitional period, preparing societies for new leadership. Economic disruption forces innovation. Technological breakthroughs demand new ethical frameworks, and cultural shifts create opportunities for voices that once remained unheard. Those who have spent years cultivating knowledge, empathy, and spiritual awareness may soon find themselves positioned to guide others through challenges that require more than technical expertise. Across the African diaspora and throughout communities shaped by resilience. This realization carries a powerful sense of historical continuity. Generations before us faced systems that attempted to limit their potential, yet they transformed adversity into creativity, faith, and cultural brilliance that influenced the entire world. Spiritual traditions, music, entrepreneurship, and social movements emerged from places where determination and hope refused to be extinguished by hardship. That legacy reminds us that preparation often takes place in environments where recognition is scarce, but inner strength is abundant. Joseph's journey reflects this same principle. The young dreamer who was once dismissed by his brothers became the architect of survival for an entire region. When people who have endured trials begin to recognize the value of their experiences, they carry a perspective capable of transforming institutions and communities alike. The next generation of innovators, educators, spiritual guides, and strategic thinkers may arise from backgrounds that taught them how to navigate uncertainty long before the world acknowledged its importance. As global systems continue evolving, those individuals may discover that their lived experiences have equipped them with insight that cannot be taught in traditional classrooms. The days surrounding March 13 therefore represent more than a symbolic alignment in the sky. They represent a mirror reflecting the readiness of individuals who have been quietly preparing for their moment of purpose. Some will feel a sudden surge of clarity about the direction they must pursue, while others may sense a gradual unfolding where opportunities appear in places they once overlooked. The key message woven through this entire narrative is movement. Movement away from fear. Movement away from the belief that past struggles defined the limits of possibility. Joseph could not step into Pharaoh's palace while still seeing himself as a victim of betrayal. He had to recognize that his journey carried meaning beyond the pain he endured. Likewise, many people today must release the narratives that have confined their sense of identity. The job loss that forced reinvention, the isolation that prompted deep reflection, the unexpected change that redirected life's course. These experiences may actually represent the hidden curriculum of leadership. When individuals reinterpret their past through the lens of preparation rather than failure, they unlock the confidence required to move forward with purpose. The world ahead will demand a different kind of leadership than the one that dominated previous decades. It will require individuals who understand both technological transformation and spiritual wisdom, people capable of navigating data-driven economies while remaining anchored in values that protect human dignity and community well-being. Artificial intelligence may analyze information at astonishing speed, but it cannot replace the moral imagination needed to decide how that information should shape society. That responsibility will fall to leaders who recognize that progress without compassion leads to imbalance. In the coming years, communities will search for guides who can interpret the complexity of the moment while inspiring hope that transcends fear. Those guides may emerge from unexpected places. Entrepreneurs who reinvent industries with ethical vision, educators who empower the next generation to think critically and creatively, and spiritual voices who remind people that purpose extends beyond material success. The preparation for such roles often begins long before the spotlight appears. During seasons when individuals quietly refine their character and learn to trust the voice of calling within them. As this narrative reaches its conclusion, imagine Joseph standing once again before Pharaoh after years of obscurity, realizing that every step of his journey had led to that precise moment. The pit taught him humility, the prison taught him patience, and the interpretation of dreams revealed his unique gift for perceiving patterns others could not see. In a similar way, many viewers may soon discover that the challenges they endured were shaping qualities that will become essential in the years ahead. The approaching alignment symbolizes a doorway opening within the collective story of our time, inviting individuals to step forward with courage and clarity. Destiny rarely unfolds in isolation. It reveals itself through choices made when opportunity meets readiness. And somewhere among the millions observing the changing world, there are people who will recognize that the season of waiting is ending. They will understand that the same life which once felt uncertain was quietly preparing them to rise with wisdom, resilience, and purpose. When that realization arrives, the path forward will no longer feel hidden, because the journey from the pit to the palace will finally make sense. And the destiny that once seemed distant will begin unfolding one courageous step at a time.